The boy had always lived in a small, quiet town where life moved slowly. People knew each other, and stories traveled fast. He was known in his neighborhood not for wealth or status but for his curiosity and the strange, undeniable spark in his eyes. Everyone knew he loved music, even if he had nothing fancy to play on. Sometimes he would sit outside the small windows of houses, listening to sounds of the town and imagining them turning into beautiful melodies. His home was modest, a tiny place with chipped paint and creaky wooden floors. There were no grand pianos or shiny instruments. What he had were simple tools, well-worn and patched with care. Each string on his instrument had been replaced several times, each note practiced over and over until it could be played perfectly. He would sit for hours, lost in sound, imagining a world bigger than his own. To him, music was a way to reach beyond the walls that confined his daily life. One morning, the boy heard news that would change everything. A millionaire was visiting the town. Not just any millionaire, but one who was famous for showing off his wealth and skills at events, often laughing at anyone who dared to try something he considered impossible. He traveled with grandeur, and the townspeople spoke of him with awe and fear. He was holding a gathering at his mansion, and people were buzzing with curiosity and excitement. The boy had never been inside a place like that. The mansion was said to have golden gates, marble floors, and rooms filled with treasures that most could only dream of seeing. His heart pounded at the thought of going. He decided he had to see it. It wasn't about the millionaire, not really. It was about proving to himself that he could face something bigger than his small world. He wanted to see the grandeur, to hear the sounds, to feel the energy of a place where people believed only money and status mattered. And perhaps, just perhaps, he wanted to show that talent and heart could stand against arrogance. The day of the gathering, he wore the simplest clothes he owned. They were clean, patched in places, but modest enough that he would not stand out too much. Yet, he felt out of place as he approached the mansion. The gates were taller than any tree he had ever seen, decorated with intricate designs that glinted in the sunlight. Servants moved quickly through the gardens, and the sound of laughter, music, and clinking glasses floated through the air. It was a world completely different from his own. He entered cautiously, holding his small instrument close, hiding it as best as he could. His eyes widened as he looked around. People were dressed in sparkling clothes, talking in loud, confident voices. Some looked at him with curiosity, others with mild disapproval, as though he did not belong. He felt a lump in his throat but reminded himself why he was there. This was not about being rich or powerful. This was about showing courage, even if only to himself. The millionaire arrived, larger than life. He wore a suit that shined, and his laugh carried across the room. People clapped, and some whispered nervously, waiting to see what he would do next. He had a reputation for challenging anyone who tried to impress him, for mocking those who dared to dream bigger than their circumstances. And yet, he had a magnetic presence that drew attention, making even the confident feel small. The boy found a quiet corner, observing. He watched the millionaire demonstrate his skills, playing instruments with ease, showing off wealth in ways that seemed almost unreal. Everyone cheered, laughed, and applauded. But the boy's eyes were focused, not on the grandeur, but on the challenge it represented. He thought of his own hours of practice, the countless evenings spent perfecting notes, the feeling of music flowing from him in ways only he could understand. He knew he could do something no one in that room would expect. As he watched, the millionaire's eyes caught his. The boy froze, but he did not look away. There was a flicker of amusement in the millionaire's gaze, a small smirk that made it clear he thought the boy was insignificant. He leaned toward a nearby guest and laughed quietly, whispering something that the boy could not hear, but it did not matter. The laughter was directed at him, but it only fueled a quiet determination. The boy took a deep breath and stepped forward, his small instrument held tightly in his hands. The room seemed to go quieter for a moment, as if the walls themselves were curious about what he might do. The millionaire looked down at him, raised an eyebrow, and laughed openly. "I can perform this," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. The words were meant to intimidate, to make the boy feel smaller, to assert that no one could match his skill. But the boy did not flinch. He nodded slightly, acknowledging the challenge, even though his heart raced. He felt the weight of every doubter in the room, the disbelief of the crowd, and yet he stood firm. It was not arrogance that gave him courage. It was belief in something greater than wealth, something that could not be bought. It was the music, the hours of dedication, the moments spent dreaming in silence. He began to play softly at first, almost a whisper of sound that seemed fragile in the grandeur of the mansion. But the notes were clear, precise, full of feeling. The boy closed his eyes, letting the music flow through him, letting it tell the story he had carried in his heart for so long. Every string, every tone, every rhythm came together as if the instrument itself knew the passion behind the hands guiding it. The room seemed to hold its breath, the laughter fading as the unexpected beauty filled the space. People began to notice. Eyes widened, jaws dropped, and whispers spread across the crowd. This small boy, who had appeared out of nowhere, was creating something extraordinary. The music was not just sound, it was a presence, a story, a challenge in its own right. The millionaire, for the first time, looked uncertain. His smirk faltered, his eyes narrowing, trying to understand how someone so unassuming could hold such power in their hands. The boy's mind was calm, even as adrenaline surged. He was not performing to impress, not performing to win favor. He was performing because it was who he was, because he had poured everything he had into these moments, because he knew that talent and heart could speak louder than wealth or status. Every note carried the echo of his small town, his struggles, his dreams, his silent victories. The music swelled, filling the room, weaving around the millionaire's doubts and the audience's expectations. Some leaned forward, unable to believe what they were hearing. Some whispered to each other, recognizing the effort, the skill, and the courage it took for someone so young and humble to stand and create something unforgettable. The boy's performance was not just about playing notes. It was about claiming a space in a world that had always seemed unreachable. As the final note lingered, a silence fell over the room, heavy and profound. People looked at the boy, unsure whether to applaud or remain in awe. The millionaire stared, his expression unreadable, caught between disbelief and admiration. No one had ever expected this. No one had ever imagined that something so unpretentious could hold such power. The boy opened his eyes, meeting the millionaire's gaze, steady and unafraid, knowing he had done more than perform. He had made a statement that could not be ignored. The boy did not boast, did not smile triumphantly. He simply stood, letting the last echoes of his music fade, feeling a quiet pride and a deep sense of fulfillment. The room slowly began to react, murmurs turning into claps, hesitant at first, then growing louder. The millionaire's laughter was gone, replaced by something new, an acknowledgement that talent and heart could never be measured by wealth alone. And in that moment, the boy knew that this encounter, this challenge, this unthinkable act, was only the beginning. It was not about the mansion, the millionaire, or the applause. It was about the courage to step forward, to believe in oneself, and to turn dreams into reality no matter how impossible they seemed. He had crossed a threshold, and nothing could take that away. The boy left the mansion that day with his head held high. He had faced the grandeur, the laughter, the doubts, and had emerged not just unscathed but triumphant in a way that mattered most. The millionaire would remember him, the guests would remember him, but most importantly, he would remember himself. And in the quiet of his own world, away from glittering halls and golden gates, he would continue to dream, to play, to create, knowing that the true measure of greatness was not in wealth, but in courage, heart, and the unyielding pursuit of one's passion. The boy returned home that evening, his small instrument carefully wrapped and placed on the table. He could still hear the echoes of the mansion, the laughter of the millionaire, the soft applause of some guests, and most vividly, the stunned silence that followed his performance. Even though he had felt proud, he knew this was just the beginning. He wanted to prepare for the next challenge, and deep down, he felt it was inevitable that the millionaire would not let this go unnoticed. The next morning, the boy woke early. The sky was painted in soft hues of orange and pink, and the town was slowly coming to life. Birds chirped in the distance, and the sounds of vendors setting up their stalls filled the streets. The boy sat by the window with a notebook, writing down every detail he remembered from the mansion. The way the millionaire moved, the expressions on the faces of the guests, the way people whispered and glanced at him with a mixture of disbelief and admiration. These details mattered. They were clues about what it would take to prepare for whatever came next. He picked up his instrument and began to practice. His fingers moved over the strings with precision, recalling every note he had played the day before. But this time he wanted more. He wanted to push beyond what he had done, to create something that could not be ignored or dismissed. He remembered the laughter of the millionaire and how it had tried to shake his confidence. It fueled him, turning nerves into determination. Outside, the world continued as usual. Neighbors went about their chores, children ran through the streets, and the town seemed unaware of the small boy who had just made an unexpected mark at the mansion. Yet in his own quiet space he felt a new energy. It was the energy of challenge, of opportunity, and of proving oneself not to others, but to life itself. He imagined himself back at the mansion, stepping forward with courage, and letting the music flow freely, stronger and more confident than before. Word spread quickly through the town that the boy had performed in front of the millionaire. People whispered about the unthinkable act, amazed that someone so young and unassuming could stand up to wealth and arrogance and still hold his ground. Some were skeptical, thinking the story might be exaggerated, while others nodded knowingly, having seen glimpses of the boy's dedication and talent over the years. It gave him a quiet sense of pride, though he never let it distract him from the work ahead. Days passed, and the boy continued to practice. He experimented with new melodies, trying combinations that challenged him, forcing him to think differently. Each day, he felt the music become a part of him, shaping his thoughts, his emotions, and even the way he moved through the world. He noticed small things, the rhythm of footsteps on cobblestones, the wind rustling through trees, the laughter of children playing. Everything became part of his preparation, every moment a lesson in awareness, creativity, and resilience. Meanwhile, the mansion remained a topic of conversation. Some guests were still talking about the boy, trying to figure out who he was, how he had managed to perform so flawlessly. The millionaire, on the other hand, was quietly intrigued. He had laughed at the boy, confident that no one from a humble background could match his skill. Yet the boy had not only performed but had impressed the guests and disrupted the usual order of admiration. For the first time, the millionaire felt a hint of curiosity mixed with respect, though he would not admit it publicly. The boy's family watched him with quiet concern. They understood his talent, but they worried about the pressures and the attention he was attracting. They reminded him to be careful, to remain humble, and to focus on the joy of creation rather than the recognition of others. The boy listened, appreciating their wisdom, but he also knew that to grow, he could not stay in the safety of their advice alone. He had to step into challenges, face skepticism, and prove himself on his own terms. One afternoon, a letter arrived, delivered by a well-dressed messenger. It bore the mansion's emblem, and the boy felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension as he opened it. The note was simple yet powerful. It was an invitation to return to the mansion for a private performance, a chance to show more of his skill and creativity. The boy's heart raced, but he did not feel fear. Instead, he felt the steady beat of determination, knowing that this was the opportunity he had been preparing for. He spent the next few days in focused preparation. Every practice session was meticulous, each note considered, every rhythm tested until it resonated perfectly. He remembered the faces in the mansion, the laughter, the whispers, and the looks of disbelief. He imagined the moment he would step forward again, and he wanted it to be flawless, not to humiliate anyone, but to demonstrate that talent and effort could transcend circumstance. The day of the private performance arrived. The boy dressed simply as he always did, and carried his instrument carefully. The streets of the town seemed different that morning, as if they, too, were aware of the journey he was undertaking. Neighbors offered nods and smiles, some recognizing the quiet courage in his eyes. He walked with a steady pace, each step measured, each breath controlled, feeling the weight of preparation and the thrill of the unknown. Arriving at the mansion, he noticed changes. The rooms seemed quieter, more expectant. The guests who had been skeptical before were observing closely, curious about what the boy would do next. The millionaire approached him, not with laughter this time, but with an inscrutable expression. He asked almost casually what the boy planned to perform. The boy did not answer with words. Instead, he simply nodded, readying his instrument and preparing to speak through the music. The room seemed to hold its breath as he began. His performance started gently, each note deliberate, each movement fluid. But this time, there was a new layer, a depth that had not been present before. He had learned to infuse his own emotions, his experiences, and the quiet strength of his journey into every sound. The room was captivated. Guests leaned forward, unable to look away, feeling the music as something more than a performance. It was a story, a message, and a revelation. The millionaire watched closely, his expression shifting from curiosity to a mixture of surprise and admiration. He had underestimated the boy once, and now he was realizing the boy's growth and potential. The performance was not just about skill, it was about courage, determination, and the refusal to be defined by circumstance. The millionaire had never seen anything like it, and he could not dismiss it with laughter or derision. When the final notes faded, the room remained silent for a long moment. Everyone processed what they had just witnessed. It was more than talent. It was the unshakable spirit of someone who had refused to be limited by the world around him. The boy lowered his instrument, his eyes calm, his posture confident but not boastful. He had given everything he had, and it had been enough to challenge assumptions, change perceptions, and leave a mark that would not soon be forgotten. The millionaire stepped forward, his usual smirk replaced with a nod of acknowledgement. It was brief, subtle, but the boy recognized it for what it was. Respect earned, not given. The guests began to applaud, some quietly at first, then with growing enthusiasm. The boy did not seek applause, yet he felt the satisfaction of knowing that his efforts, his courage, and his talent were finally recognized. As he left the mansion, the boy felt a mix of relief and anticipation. He knew this was not the end. There would be more challenges, more opportunities, more moments to prove himself, not for the sake of recognition, but for the love of what he could create. The journey was ongoing, and each step, each note, each performance was part of a larger story. A story of perseverance, heart, and the quiet power of believing in oneself even when the world doubts. Returning home, he placed his instrument carefully on the table. He looked out the window at the town he loved, feeling a deep connection to the world that had shaped him and the one he was learning to navigate. The experience at the mansion had taught him that courage and preparation could turn even the most unexpected moments into triumph. And while the millionaire's laughter had once seemed daunting, it now felt like a distant echo, replaced by a growing confidence that would guide him through every challenge yet to come. The boy spent the days following the mansion visit in quiet, focused preparation. He had returned to his small room, the familiar walls giving him comfort, but he no longer saw the space in the same way. Every corner, every object, every sound became a part of his practice. He studied the way light fell across the floor, the rhythm of the wind through the trees, and the faint hum of distant streets. All of these small details seemed to whisper lessons about patience, observation, and awareness. He practiced relentlessly, sometimes from dawn until the sun began to dip behind the hills. He tried new combinations, new melodies, and experimented with rhythms he had never attempted before. Each mistake taught him something. Each success built his confidence. He discovered that mastery was not about talent alone but about the willingness to keep learning and adapting. The hours of preparation were exhausting, yet the boy found a strange joy in them. The challenges he faced became companions, shaping his mind and heart as much as his fingers. At night, the boy would sit quietly and reflect on the reactions from the mansion. The whispers of the guests, the stunned looks, and even the laughter that had once been meant to mock him now seemed like echoes of an unfinished story. He knew that he had surprised people, but he also knew that real mastery required more than a single performance. He wanted to push beyond what he had done before, to create something that could not be forgotten, something that would leave a lasting mark. Sometimes, he would close his eyes and imagine himself back in the grand hall. He pictured the millionaire, sitting with that familiar smirk, the other guests watching curiously, some skeptical, some in awe. He imagined the tension in the room, the way every note he played could either confirm his worth or be dismissed as a fluke. That imagined tension drove him to work harder, to refine his skills, and to perfect every movement and sound. He realized that the true challenge was not the audience or the millionaire. It was himself, his ability to rise above fear and uncertainty. He also remembered the advice of his family. They had encouraged him to remain humble, to focus on the joy of creating rather than the recognition it might bring. He took their words seriously. He did not want to perform to impress the millionaire or anyone else. He wanted to perform because it was a part of who he was. Yet, he also understood that the opportunity before him was rare, and he had to be ready for it. He had to channel both humility and confidence in equal measure. As he practiced, the boy experimented with new techniques that required complete concentration and patience. His fingers moved over the instrument with growing precision, sometimes slipping, sometimes striking perfection. He learned to listen not just to the notes but to the spaces between them, the silence that could speak as powerfully as sound. He discovered that music was not just about playing correctly but about expressing something deeper, something that could reach the hearts of those who listened. He also began to explore the emotions that music could carry. He remembered times of struggle and small victories, the quiet moments of joy, the pangs of doubt, and the flickers of hope that had sustained him. He tried to translate those emotions into melodies, letting each note carry a piece of his story. The process was exhausting, often leaving him physically drained, but he found that it also strengthened his spirit. Each practice session became a conversation between him and his instrument, a dialogue that refined not just his skill but his understanding of himself. Outside, the town went about its normal routines. People talked about the mansion, about the millionaire, and about the boy who had dared to perform in such a grand space. Some were curious, some skeptical, and some quietly inspired. The boy heard their whispers and smiles from a distance, but he did not allow them to distract him. He knew that the preparation he was doing now mattered far more than opinions or rumors. He focused on the work at hand, on the quiet mastery that could only come from dedication and perseverance. One afternoon, the boy encountered a small setback. One of his instruments broke, a string snapped. At a crucial moment, and he felt a surge of frustration. He could have given up, thinking the timing was wrong, that luck had turned against him. But he did not. Instead, he carefully repaired the instrument, understanding that challenges were part of the journey. The moment of frustration became a lesson in patience, resilience, and problem-solving. He realized that true preparation was not just about perfect practice. It was about learning to handle imperfections and continue moving forward. During this period, the boy also studied the techniques of others. He watched recordings, listened to stories, and absorbed knowledge from various sources. He did not imitate blindly but took inspiration from others, learning what could be adapted to his own style and skill. Each lesson added depth to his understanding, and he began to notice subtle improvements in his performance. His playing became more expressive, more deliberate, more capable of conveying emotions without words. As the days turned into weeks, the boy began to feel a new sense of readiness. He could sense his progress, not in comparison to others, but in the way he moved, the confidence in his hands, the clarity of his melodies. He had built a reservoir of skill and emotion that he could draw from, and he felt prepared for whatever challenge lay ahead. The anticipation of returning to the mansion no longer brought fear, only determination and quiet excitement. He knew that the next performance would be different. The millionaire's smirk and laughter were still in his mind, but now they were motivators rather than intimidators. The boy understood that the true power of his talent lay not in proving anyone wrong, but in expressing his dedication, his heart, and his relentless pursuit of growth. He felt ready to step forward, to face expectations, and to create something unforgettable. The night before he was scheduled to return to the mansion, the boy sat by the window, staring at the stars. He thought about everything he had learned during these days of preparation. The patience, the resilience, the creativity, the humility, and the quiet strength. He realized that the journey itself had transformed him, and that the next performance would not just be a test for the millionaire or the guests. It would be a culmination of his efforts, a reflection of his growth, and an opportunity to show the power of dedication and courage. When morning came, he felt calm and focused. He carefully packed his instrument, double-checked everything, and stepped out into the town. Each familiar street and face reminded him of the journey that had brought him here, the quiet hours of practice, the lessons learned, and the small victories that had built his confidence. He walked with purpose, not arrogance, but with the steady assurance that he was ready. As he approached the mansion, he noticed subtle changes. The air seemed charged with anticipation, the gates taller and more imposing than before, the garden brighter in the morning light. Inside, there was a quiet hum of preparation. The millionaire and the guests awaited, curious to see what the boy would do this time. The boy's heart beat steadily, not with fear, but with the calm certainty that he was prepared, that his practice had honed his skill and strengthened his spirit. He stepped forward once again, holding his instrument with care and confidence. The room seemed to watch him, every eye focused, every breath held. This time, he did not need to imagine or prepare internally. He had done the work, faced the challenges, and learned the lessons that only time, effort, and dedication could teach. The stage was set, the moment ready, and the boy knew that his preparation would carry him through. The next act would be the true test, the one where skill, heart, and courage would come together to create something unforgettable. The boy arrived at the mansion, his hands steady and his heart calm, carrying the small instrument he had devoted so many hours to mastering. The gates opened as if they recognized him, and the familiar halls seemed almost to welcome his presence. He was no longer the timid boy who had first stepped inside. He was someone who had spent days and nights refining not just his skill, but his focus, his patience, and his confidence. Every step he took felt measured, deliberate, and meaningful. The room was filled with anticipation. Guests whispered among themselves, curious about what the boy would do next. The millionaire, seated in a place of prominence, had a curious expression on his face. Gone was the mocking smirk that had greeted the boy before. Instead, there was a faint spark of interest, a silent acknowledgement that the boy had grown since their last encounter. The atmosphere was charged, each person holding their breath as they waited for the first note. The boy stepped forward, placing his instrument carefully on his lap. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, taking a deep breath. The world seemed to pause around him, as if the room itself was aware that something extraordinary was about to unfold. He could hear the faint shuffling of feet, the soft whispers, and the distant rustle of fabric, but none of it distracted him. He focused inward, drawing on every hour of practice, every lesson learned, every emotion he had ever felt while playing. When his fingers touched the instrument, the first note rang out softly, almost as a whisper, yet it carried a weight that commanded attention. The sound filled the room, delicate but precise, drawing listeners in with its clarity and emotion. The boy played with a confidence that seemed to flow naturally, each note connecting seamlessly to the next. It was as if the music had a life of its own, moving through him and into the space, captivating everyone present. The millionaire leaned forward, his eyes narrowing, a mixture of surprise and curiosity in his expression. He had expected talent, perhaps even skill, but what he was hearing surpassed anything he had imagined. The boy was not merely performing. He was telling a story, conveying emotion and experience through every vibration of his instrument. The audience, too, was mesmerized, unable to look away, caught in the intricate dance of sound and feeling. As the performance continued, the boy added subtle flourishes, delicate movements that enhanced the melody without overwhelming it. He had learned to control every nuance, to guide the emotion of the room with intention. Each note carried meaning, Each pause allowed reflection, and every crescendo built anticipation. People began to notice the depth and complexity of the music, whispering to one another in astonishment. Some gasped softly, unable to believe that someone so young and unassuming could command such presence and power. The boy's mind was focused entirely on the music, but he also felt a connection to the room. He sensed the reactions of the listeners, the shifting energy, and the awe that grew with each passing moment. It was not about competition, not about proving superiority, but about creating something that could move hearts, inspire thought, and leave a lasting impression. And in that, he succeeded beyond anything he had imagined. Millionaire's expression shifted again, from curiosity to awe. He had underestimated the boy once, expecting amusement and mockery, yet he could not deny the talent, dedication, and heart before him. The performance was flawless, yet more than flawless. It was a testament to perseverance, courage, and the refusal to be defined by circumstance. The millionaire had never encountered anyone like this, and he recognized that the boy had not only met his expectations but had far exceeded them. The music swelled to a powerful climax, filling every corner of the room with its resonance. Guests leaned forward, captivated by the skill and emotion conveyed. Some closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them, feeling each note as if it were a personal message. The boy played with a mastery that suggested he was not just an observer of the world but a participant, translating life's beauty, struggle, and joy into sound. It was a performance that could not be dismissed, one that commanded respect, admiration, and awe. As the final note lingered, the room remained silent, suspended in the afterglow of the music. The audience processed what they had just witnessed, some unable to speak, others searching for words that could capture the experience. The boy opened his eyes, calm and composed, acknowledging the impact of his performance without arrogance. He had not sought applause, yet he felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that his dedication, focus, and courage had created a moment of genuine connection. Slowly, the applause began, hesitant at first, then growing louder as people recognized the brilliance they had witnessed. Guests clapped, some standing, some cheering quietly, their faces reflecting astonishment and admiration. The millionaire remained seated for a moment, taking in the scene, before rising with a nod. It was subtle, but it carried meaning, a recognition that the boy had achieved something remarkable, something that transcended expectations, wealth, and social status. The boy did not boast or gloat. He simply acknowledged the room with a quiet nod, allowing the music to speak for itself. He had faced fear, doubt, and skepticism and had emerged triumphant, not through arrogance or bravado, but through preparation, perseverance, and heart. The performance was more than a demonstration of skill. It was a statement, a reminder that true talent and dedication could overcome prejudice and assumption. Guests continued to whisper among themselves, discussing the performance, sharing their amazement, and reflecting on the boy's courage and ability. The room, once filled with casual conversation and laughter, had been transformed into a space of reflection, admiration, and inspiration. The boy had changed the atmosphere not through wealth or power, but through authenticity and skill. The millionaire approached the boy, a mix of respect and curiosity in his eyes. He extended a hand, acknowledging the effort, courage, and talent displayed. The gesture, simple yet significant, spoke volumes. The boy accepted it with grace, recognizing that respect had been earned through action, not demanded through position. The connection was brief but meaningful, a silent understanding that greatness could come from the most unexpected places. After the performance, the boy stepped back, letting the room absorb the final echoes. He could see the impact on the guests, their surprise, their admiration, and the newfound awareness that true talent and dedication were not confined to wealth, appearance, or social standing. He had proven that determination and heart could achieve what many considered impossible, and in doing so, he had left a lasting impression that would not fade quickly. As he left the mansion that day, the boy felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had faced a challenge, embraced preparation, and created something extraordinary. The experience had not only tested his skill but had strengthened his confidence, resilience, and understanding of his own capabilities. The mansion, the millionaire, and the audience had been part of the stage, but the true triumph was within him, the knowledge that he had given his best and achieved something remarkable. Walking through the quiet streets of the town on his way home, the boy reflected on the journey. Every hour of practice, every moment of doubt and perseverance, every lesson learned had led to this point. He realized that true accomplishment was not measured by applause alone, but by the courage to face challenges, the dedication to refine one's craft, and the willingness to share one's heart with the world. The unthinkable act had not only surprised others, but had affirmed his own potential, inspiring him to continue on the path of growth and discovery. That evening, back in his small room, the boy placed his instrument carefully and sat in quiet reflection. He thought about the mansion, the guests, the millionaire, and the music that had connected them all in a way words could not. He knew that more challenges lay ahead, more moments that would test his skill, patience, and courage. But he also knew that he had proven something vital, that talent, determination, and heart could overcome even the most daunting expectations. And with that understanding, he felt ready to face whatever came next, confident in his ability to rise to every challenge with grace and unwavering dedication. The boy returned home after the performance, carrying a quiet pride that he could feel deep in his chest. The streets of the town looked familiar, yet somehow they seemed different to him now. Everything felt bigger and more alive. People looked at him with curiosity, and some nodded in respect, having heard stories of what had happened at the mansion. He walked past them with a calm smile, carrying the satisfaction of knowing that his courage and effort had created a lasting impact. That evening, he sat by the small window of his room, the sky painted with soft shades of purple and orange. The instrument he had relied on for countless hours rested gently on the table. He touched it lightly, feeling the connection that had grown over years of dedication. This instrument had been more than a tool. It had been a companion, a teacher, and a bridge between his dreams and the world beyond. He remembered the reactions at the mansion, the faces of the guests, and most importantly, the subtle nod of respect from the millionaire. All of it reminded him that courage and perseverance could break barriers, even those that seemed impossible to cross. The next morning, the boy awoke with a sense of purpose. He knew that the performance had changed the way people saw him, but he also understood that true growth and accomplishment came from within. He practiced again, not to impress anyone, but to continue refining his skills and exploring the depth of his own potential. Each note, each melody, and each rhythm carried the story of his journey, the challenges he had overcome, and the dreams that had driven him forward. He realized that recognition was rewarding, but the real reward was the confidence and skill he had gained through dedication. Word of his performance continued to spread. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers spoke of the boy who had faced the millionaire and amazed everyone with his talent. Some were inspired to pursue their own passions, while others reflected on the courage it took to stand up in front of a room full of people and give one's best. The boy did not let the attention distract him. He remained focused on his craft, understanding that true fulfillment came from the effort and dedication he poured into his work, not from the applause or admiration of others. Days turned into weeks, and the boy's life began to balance between his quiet town and the opportunities that had opened up. He continued to practice diligently, each session reinforcing the lessons he had learned. He experimented with new melodies and techniques, challenging himself to grow and explore beyond the familiar. The process was not always easy. There were moments of doubt, frustration, and fatigue. Yet he remembered the mansion, the faces of the guests, and the feeling of performing with his whole heart. Those memories fueled him, reminding him why he had started and why he could not give up. One afternoon, a letter arrived, this time from the millionaire himself. The boy read it carefully, a mix of curiosity and excitement rising within him. The letter expressed admiration for the boy's talent and courage and invited him to collaborate on a musical project that could reach a wider audience. It was an acknowledgement of his skill, a gesture of respect, and an opportunity to share his passion with the world. The boy felt a surge of gratitude, not for the recognition alone, but for the chance to continue learning, growing, and creating in ways he had never imagined. The boy's family watched his journey with pride and amazement. They had always known his potential, but seeing it recognized by others, especially someone as influential as the Millionaire, was extraordinary. They offered support and guidance, reminding him to stay grounded, humble, and true to himself. The boy listened attentively, valuing their wisdom, and promised himself that no matter how far his talent took him, he would remain connected to his roots and the values that had guided him. As the boy prepared for his new opportunities, he reflected on everything he had learned. He realized that his journey had been about more than skill or recognition. It had been about courage, the courage to step forward when others doubted him, to face fear and uncertainty, and to embrace challenges as opportunities for growth. It had been about perseverance, the determination to practice, improve, and refine his talent despite obstacles and setbacks. And it had been about heart, the ability to pour emotion, authenticity, and passion into his craft, touching others in ways that transcended wealth, status, and expectation. When he returned to the mansion for the collaborative project, he was no longer the boy who had first stepped inside with timid eyes and a small instrument. He carried himself with quiet confidence, ready to face new challenges and share his music with a wider audience. The Millionaire greeted him with genuine respect, acknowledging the journey, effort, and talent that had led to this moment. The guests and collaborators were eager to witness what the boy would create next, knowing that they were about to experience something remarkable. During the project, the boy worked tirelessly, collaborating with musicians, learning new techniques, and refining compositions. He approached every task with humility and determination, knowing that true mastery required both talent and effort. The work was demanding, but he embraced it fully, finding joy in the process, in the challenge, and in the opportunity to grow. Each note he played, each melody he created, and each moment of collaboration strengthened his skill and deepened his understanding of music and the world around him. Through this journey, the boy also inspired others. Young musicians, artists, and dreamers looked to him as an example of what could be achieved through dedication, courage, and heart. He shared his story openly, not to boast, but to encourage others to pursue their passions, to embrace challenges, and to believe in themselves even when the world doubts them. His experience became a testament to the idea that talent, when combined with perseverance and integrity, could break through barriers and create lasting impact. The boy continued to perform, travel, and collaborate, always carrying the lessons of his first encounter at the mansion. He never forgot the fear, the anticipation, or the determination that had fueled his first performance. Those moments remained a part of him, reminding him that every achievement, no matter how grand, began with courage and a willingness to take the first step. He understood that recognition and success were fleeting, but the growth, resilience, and fulfillment that came from dedication were lasting. Years later, the boy, now a young man, looked back on the journey that had begun in a small town with a humble instrument. He remembered the laughter of the Millionaire, the astonishment of the guests, and the quiet pride that had filled him as he realized his own potential. He reflected on the lessons learned, the importance of courage, perseverance, heart, and humility. He understood that these values were not just for performance or recognition but for life itself, guiding him through challenges, successes, and moments of doubt. He continued to inspire others, sharing his story and his music with those who sought guidance and encouragement. He reminded them that greatness was not determined by wealth, status, or external validation, but by the willingness to embrace challenges, practice with dedication, and perform with authenticity and heart. His journey became a beacon for those who believed in the power of perseverance, courage, and the pursuit of passion. As he played his instrument, whether in a small room, a grand hall, or a collaborative project, he felt the connection to his roots, his journey, and the countless hours of preparation that had shaped him. Every note carried the story of his growth, the lessons learned, and the courage to face the unthinkable. The boy who had once been underestimated had proven not only to others but to himself that true talent and determination could achieve extraordinary results. In the quiet moments, away from applause and recognition, the boy felt the deepest fulfillment. He understood that the unthinkable performance had been more than an act of skill. It had been a declaration of perseverance, courage, and heart. And he knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he possessed the strength to face them, to create, and to inspire others with his journey. The story that had begun in a small town, with humble beginnings and relentless dedication, had become a testament to the power of belief, effort, and the human spirit.